Welcome to Recovery His Way. I'm Tom Reynolds, the host, and welcome to our campus here. I'm joined today with Jacob Jackson. Welcome, Jacob.
Hey.
Jacob came originally to us, I think I look back, December 30th of last year. So right before New Year's Eve, you came to a recovery program. And I think the day after 4th of July is when you graduated.
Yeah.
And you went through the program, and then after 6 months decided to stay with us for another 6 months and joined our advanced recovery group. And then recently, of course, this week, you're starting to train and get ready to be one of our campus leaders here. And so I'm excited about that. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you specifically was not only your journey, but kind of these new choices that you're making in terms of where those come from, what motivates them, what your hopes are of those kind of things. So I guess we'll start just with the beginning. So maybe give us a little sketch of kind of your background, what brought you to this point, what your addiction kind of growth, development was like, and your recovery journey as well.
Okay. Well, my addiction started pretty early. I started going to parties and things like that with my sister as a senior when I was about 12, just a couple of times. And then I started doing that on my own, going and getting with friends and having parties, and we started smoking weed around 12, 13. Really, I don't know, it seemed like it was kind of the answer to all my problems at that time. Kind of made me feel at home, okay with myself, I guess. And that continued really quickly. I started taking prescription pills soon after that. And by the time I was 16, I had already started shooting up heroin, turned to meth at 17, which heroin was my drug of choice for the whole time. And it progressed so quickly. By 19, I was on my way to get high and on a motorcycle. And I was in a motorcycle wreck, doing about 90 miles an hour, and completely crushed my leg. And at that point, I was bound to the house. I had home health coming out to me, trying to do a little physical therapy, but I stopped doing that because the nurse made a comment about track marks on my arm. So I kind of just, I don't know, my world kind of just spiraled down. I had already been to rehab twice at this point as well. And just nothing was really working because I pretty much convinced myself really that I was going to die in addiction, you know. So for about the next year, I really continued to use drugs heavily bound to my house, which made me contract staph in my knee, which went septic, caused me to become almost deathly ill at that time. I had PICC lines in my arms, so I was getting syringes and stuff delivered to my house to combat the staph that was in my bloodstream, and I was using all of that to shoot up with at the time too, which got all infected, and it was a terrible time. After finally getting through that, I went through 3 other rehab programs, which I did finish all of them, but as soon as it was over with, I mean, within the first week, you know, I was back at it again.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, you're how old now?
I'm 25.
Okay, so this all has been about half your lifetime.
Yes.
I mean, you said when you started 12, 13 years old, so at half your lifetime, you've been involved with this. I guess, a couple things. I mean, one, you grew up, where was all this happening at?
I grew up in Blount County, Alabama. I went to Susan Moore High School.
Okay, all right. And I mean, I've met your folks and stuff. You have wonderful parents and that kind of thing. So it's kind of an interesting story. A lot of times we think of these real broken families and messes and all that kind of stuff, and that things like this come out of. And yet you have kind of a normal story, you know, going through high school and the whole deal. one thing I wanted to ask about too is you talked about having been in a number of recovery programs, completing them, and then almost immediately going back to using again. What was missing there? Was it just you're not ready yet? I mean, what was it about that process that you would go to a recovery program, spend all your time doing that, and then pretty much immediately just reverse the whole process as soon as you got out?
I think, yes, I was not ready. Most of those times that I went, it was because I had nowhere else to go. I'm still was sort of a kid, even though even when I got up in more recently, I still was a kid in my mind, and my parents couldn't do anything with me, so they would sort of encourage me to go to rehab, or the courts would encourage me to go to rehab. It was never really something that I chose to do. So I was just trying to make face, get out of legal trouble, appease my parents or the rest of my family, or even one thing for sure is I would feel more comfortable by the end of it and wind up convincing myself that this time I would be able to use again and control it this time. Or I would come up with this elaborate plan while I was in rehab to be able to manage my addiction this next time.
Right. Yeah, I've talked to a lot of guys around here, and it's kind of the ultimate goal doesn't always seem to be sobriety. It seems to be my ability to manage my addiction in a way that doesn't give me negative consequences. I don't lose my job. I don't have destruction. I don't end up in wrecked motorcycles or hospitals or those kind of things, or jail. If I can just kind of manage it, that becomes the ultimate goal.
Well, if you believe that you will never not be an addict, then that's the easiest thought to have is I'm not going to be able to quit using, so I need to figure out how I can do it and still be successful.
Right.
That's the thought process.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, one of the things I was interested in too is as you progress through this process for yourself, how did it impact your family? I mean, how your mom and dad, your sister you mentioned, how are they impacted in the process? My whole family has never really seen firsthand anybody go through the things that I did or put them through. So nobody really knew how to respond to it. It definitely, all four of my grandparents died around, like right in succession. By the time I was about 17, like it seemed like just every year, a couple years, they just died. And during that time, I was really starting to take off on all this. Our family just kind of crumbled all together because of those things. And then what I was doing too, I don't know, it was just a rough time for the whole family. They didn't know what to do with me. They would talk to me and it just they didn't know how to take it because it wasn't at all the kind of path that they thought I would take. Knowing me as a kid and things like that. Right. Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that we probably don't do enough for is families go through a tremendous amount of turmoil and even divorces and separations and marital conflict and the siblings being affected all by those things too, that, the addict, as they're going through it, creates a lot of chaos around them and everyone else is trying to manage that chaos, and it can do a lot of devastation for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So the one thing I wanted to get to too, I mean, obviously at the little less than a year ago, you chose to come to His Way. I'm interested in kind of why that choice, was that just another judge made me and didn't have anywhere to go? Mom and dad were kind of kicking me out and I needed a place to stay. What kind of motivated, and kind of then too, what has this part of the journey been like relative to everything else you've been through?
Okay, well, I'll back up a little bit and say what led me to His Way was probably one of the most sure times I've been in my life about anything. Before coming here around August of last year, I left another recovery program. That one was court ordered. I completed the year-long program there and decided to stay with them and work for a period of time. Mm-hmm. But I wound up relapsing and actually managed to keep it hidden for about 6 months while I was still working there. Wow. Using Kratom. Mm-hmm. So I was able to hold it down. there we go again, talking about, felt like I was managing, but at the same time, my entire spiritual integrity was just crumbling. Bad. And when they finally found out and made me leave, all the accountability, everything I'd worked for that period of time was just gone. And I wound up driving my car back from West Virginia to home with nothing that I had been working on for the last almost 2 years. When I got back home, I tried to get a job, which I was already back in addiction. Really, I thought that I wasn't, because I lessened the kratom as a lesser substance, you know.
Okay, right.
But I definitely was back in the addiction mindset. I wound up moving into my mom's house that was vacant. Got a job, still had a car, you know, I was trying to maintain, and it was just a matter of time. I couldn't buy the kratom in Alabama, so I got back on Suboxone, which progressed to meth, which progressed back to heroin. And that was all within like a month's time of being home. I wound up overdosing the first time I used heroin again. And then a week later, I totaled the car, went back to jail, got 3 more charges, spent all the money that I had left in my name to bail myself out of jail, because this time nobody came to bail me out. You know,
is this the first time that nobody came to save you?
Yes, nobody came to save me. And I was sitting there thinking, I've done this to myself again. I was already on, when I overdosed the week before I went to jail, I knew I was going to have to go back to rehab. So I got myself on the waiting list to come to his way. My dad mentioned the program to me. He had done a Google search on programs nearby and found it. And I had actually looked at the website and already called and talked to Michael and got myself on the waiting list. When I went to jail, after I bailed myself out, I spent the next week still calling up here, talking to Michael. They actually gave me a very prompt court date. When I went to court, she was going to give me 6 months of drug court classes with 2 years probation. And I asked her if instead of the drug court, if I could come to his way, since I was already on the waiting list. She allowed me to do that. So I did that happily. You know, it just seemed like all of the things in my life were narrowing down to this part of my journey, you know, to coming here.
But you could have easily minimized the consequences, obviously, by drug court and staying where you were and that kind of stuff, and not having to uproot your life again and go somewhere else and be here, obviously, for a longer period of time and have a more intrusive kind of experience. Drug court wouldn't have required so much. Well,
when I relapsed again, sitting in jail, I had the thought that this is never going to stop. I'm going to wind up dead for sure at some point and in jail for the rest of my life, in and out, and I can't do this. So I was completely ready to want to go to rehab again. That's why I got on the waiting list to come here. And you talked about uprooting my life. I had no life. I mean, that was no life to me at all. So it was a no-brainer to me to give recovery another shot and actually have more of a foundation to want to do it on my own this time. And the court order to here was only for the first 6 months. After I cleared that, the decision to stay was my own completely, because this has been the beginning, I feel like, of the rest of my life, you know.
What do you think's been different this time? Is it just a matter of kind of maturing through everything you've gone through and kind of finally this is building upon itself into, you know, finally where you're at? Or there's some key critical things that have happened or differences that you've seen that have really been important to securing a more positive future?
I think it's a mixture of both things that you said. Becoming ready through my experience and getting my heart prepared to really give recovery a chance and to believe that I wanted to do it and to believe that I didn't have to be a drug addict anymore. And then coming here and really been given, I think, the tools to do that. I don't base my recovery off of external things, but for the first time in my life, I've been able to get a job, hold it down for the whole time that I was here, pay off my own court fines, sort of provide for myself, pay the rent, just a sense of being able to handle responsibilities, which is something I've never had at all. And if you remember when I first got here, I was constantly talking about feeling like I didn't fit in with people, or I was very socially anxious. You remember that was the main thing I focused on, and that had kind of summed up my life beforehand. I've been able to, I've been to a lot of different churches. I've gained relationships there. I gained relationships at work. My relationships with my family have restored better than I ever remember them being, really. It's a well-rounded attempt at sobriety, instead of the experiences that I've had before. This kind of encompasses every aspect of my life, has recovered since being here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I know when we talk to guys about reconciling their lives, redeeming things, so often we kind of get in this kind of mode where we're just trying to rescue them from one thing, don't do drugs. But there's so many other factors involved, right? I mean, redeeming your family life, redeeming your career path, redeeming, past mistakes or tragedies or griefs that happen in your life. And, real holistic reconciliations, reconciling all that into one holistic package instead of just focusing on the one thing that we need to get through. And I think that's an important part of even the redemption of Christ, right? I mean, Jesus came to save us, not just so we don't go to hell, but also save us from the empty way of life, to save us from the sins of our past, to save us from the broken relationships of our present, save us from the insecurities of our own selves. I mean, all those things are part of the gospel message, not just, you don't have to go to hell because I'm going to forgive you of drug addiction or pornography or whatever it is. So as you think about that, and I appreciate you bringing those points up, are there any key real turning points that you see in your journey? I mean, you mentioned that you finally felt like you were ready now. It wasn't no longer about a court order. It wasn't about just needing a place to stay. It wasn't about just trying to please my parents anymore. It was about really owning this, and that I somehow had to make a choice that I wasn't going to die a drug addict or end up incarcerated the rest of my life as a drug addict. I could be transformed from that. Is there any reasons why you got to hope that would be the case? I mean, you haven't had a track record that gave you the indication that would be a possibility. So what made you think that you could, and what has come about that has made you feel like that's happening?
I think I finally became fully disgusted with the drug use and the lifestyle attached to it. Gave up the idea that was ever going to succeed, that I was ever going to be able to manage it, and that was ever going to work. I got saved at the last program that I was in, May 20th, 2018, and I began my Christian journey for real at that point in time. But it was really just kind of studying the Bible, amassing knowledge, and trying really hard to please God. I was just trying really hard. I don't know how else to explain it. Instead of kind of letting my heart change, letting God change my heart, and stepping back and just going through the process. I was trying so hard on my own and thinking that I was doing it with God, but I really think that I was just stressing myself out. I don't know. I've cast all my worries off since coming here, and really just accepted going through the process of letting God change my life, and not feeling like there's so much pressure on me doing that. I don't know exactly how to explain that. But I grew up in the Church of God, and there were a lot of pressures involved with that. And coming here, I guess it's just a different understanding of the gospel, a different understanding of my relationship with God that is coupled with all those other things that's really, really helped make the change. Just sort of understanding God differently. And also his people differently, relying on, I don't know, the relationships that I've built with the people that work here are different than ones that I've had with people ever before, really. The guidance and things that I've received.
Right. Well, one of the things, obviously, that I mentioned early on when we talked about this is that, you were kind of required maybe to do 6 months here, but now you've stayed and you're in the second 6 months and now even looking to join the staff or starting that process. What made you decide to stay a second 6 months? I mean, your obligation was complete after the first 6. No more drug court, no more any of that. I could kind of be free and clear and just kind of go on my own, go on my way rejoicing. And yet you chose instead to stay for the second 6 months. What motivated that decision?
Yeah, it's really been a no-brainer for me. So even since the beginning, I haven't had any further plans of anything else because obviously I cannot manage that. So just kind of committed myself to staying as involved in recovery as I possibly can because that is my best chance at staying that way myself. For one, I can't, I've lived on, like I said, I've lived on my own before and that was under worse circumstances, but I don't have any desire to go back to the old way of life at all. And distancing myself from the accountability only increases those chances. So that for one on a personal level, and then again too, hoping that I can learn to look outside of myself instead of be the selfish person that I've always been and maybe do something else, help somebody else out.
Yeah, I know when you first came here, you already mentioned it. When you first came here, one of the presenting issues to you was that you felt uncomfortable interacting with people, that you had social anxiety and those kind of things, which, I found interesting because you never seemed to exemplify social anxiety, and yet you kind of expressed that you felt that. How has, this process kind of helped with that? I know you kind of touched on it already, but how has that kind of helped with that? Is social anxiety still a problem? How do you manage that?
It definitely still can be, but it's nowhere near. I think it's gotten better with a being more sure of myself, I guess, and understanding who I really am. That's helped me with socializing with other people. Also, going and getting a job, having to deal with 100 employees there. Here, there's constantly people coming in and out of the program. And doing extracurricular things like the Bible studies, counseling sessions with staff. I've really just been trying to do everything I can to communicate with people, and over a course of time, that's gotten tremendously better.
Good. That's awesome. Well, I know, so you started into ARG, and then because of some staffing change we had here, our resident director asked you to join our staff and become kind of an evening campus leader, and that type of thing. You're 25, you're fairly young relative to all the guys here, and you chose to say, yeah, I want to do that. Why did you say yes to such a thing? Is this a definition of a career path? Is this just a new challenge that you want to take on? What's kind of motivating this decision to embrace this role?
Well, this is what has worked for me. So, becoming more tied to it couldn't be a bad thing in my head, and I have felt for I've grown up in the church all my life and in somewhat of knowing of God and believing that he was supposed to be a part of my life, for my whole life. And so I've sort of, working for the other ministry, last year, I sort of felt a call to be in ministry at that point in time. And now it's came back to me again, kind of full circle, and I don't know, it just seemed like all the arrows were pointing towards getting back into just going this direction. Really, though, it's a safe choice.
Okay.
That's...
Well, I think, and one of the things in recovery that a lot of times happens that I think even a 6-month program doesn't always contribute helpfully to is that about the time somebody starts getting a pattern of recovery, it gets changed again. They graduate and they get thrust into a different situation. Stresses come back. Things are changing. I'm going to have to kind of now regroup and kind of develop a new pattern for my recovery and those kind of things. And so choosing ARG and keeping that pattern developing, and now choosing to come on staff and continue to deepen that, obviously keeps things not changing so that you can develop more stability in your recovery for a long period of time.
Yes.
And, because change, good or bad, creates stress, and stress usually leads to bad decisions for people who struggle with substance abuse. So keeping my stress levels down and my stability up can help continue to manage that success. I think the longer you're sober, the more odds of success you'll have down the road. So as you start into this new venture, and I realize this has been a few days since you've been starting to train in this new role, what are some of the things that you hope for with this change? What are some of the things that are intimidating or scary about the changes and choice that you're making?
Some of the things that I hope for, you and I have talked about maybe going back to school, which kind of wanted to do before, but also kind of really didn't know if I would ever get to do. So I'm kind of looking forward to that, going back to school and becoming more qualified to be involved in this. I look forward to, I don't know, I didn't exactly expect for this to happen. Mm-hmm. It was kind of just asked, somebody just asked me. I wasn't expecting it, and I'm looking for more opportunities like that. Just when I got here, I made the commitment to whatever I was asked to do, I would just say yes. And it's led me to this point, and I believe fully that God's got more things in store. So I'm just kind of looking for those opportunities. Mm-hmm. Things that are intimidating, I would have to think about that one. I don't know. I'm not really worried about that. I know there's got to be things that intimidate me. I don't want to say that I'm not fearful at all, but things are so much better than they ever have been in my life. I mean, my life has really never, before this, has never really been good. So it's got to be better than that.
Right. I understand. Well, I'm excited about you joining us on this adventure. I don't know where it's going to take us, but I'm excited you're a part of our team. Welcome to the team.
Thank you.
And I'm confident that you're going to do great, and I'm looking forward to being a part of that journey. I've enjoyed our times that we've had together on a weekly basis, just working through the things that are your challenges and your opportunities to grow spiritually and in your recovery. And I know not only will great things happen for you, but I believe that with you allowing God to work in you, that you'll begin to bring great things to your family, to your friends, to your community, and that what at one time was kind of a negative, I think God will redeem into a glorious positive. And so I'm looking forward to that. And again, thank you for being with us today. And thank you for joining us, Recovery His Way. If you want to learn more about His Way, you can look at our website at hiswayinc.org. Thank you.